Hello, hello. Welcome to today's episode. We are going to be talking all about Instagram stories. So, if you have seen me on Instagram, you've probably heard me share about this before. You've probably seen how I show up in stories. They are a huge, really, really important piece to building your business because Instagram stories are where connection is really made, right? You're able to be a lot more casual, you're able to be more yourself. And it's where you help your existing followers, the people who've already decided, they like your content, they're interested in you. It's how you help them take that next step and actually begin working with you. Whether you are in the beginning stages of building your private practice and your goal is to get these people to become therapy clients, maybe you're somebody who's more interested in scaling and you're wanting to get people into a course or a membership or a group coaching program. Instagram stories are where conversions are made, right? They are where sales are made. And honestly, they are like a very fun, sort of light piece of your content strategy once you get the hang of it. So if you're somebody who's had trouble posting on Instagram stories, if you feel like you post and nobody engages, you overthink and don't know what to say, so you end up not posting at all, I promise today's episode is going to help a ton. When I first started on Instagram, I had no idea what to post on Instagram stories. And I actually went and scrolled back to October 2020 when I started my Instagram page, all the way back in the archives, in order to do a little bit of research for this episode because I wanted to really see like what was I posting in the beginning. So that first month, October 2020, all of my stories were resharing other people's graphics in my story, right? And that was fine, but it was not particularly effective. I wasn't getting a lot of replies from things. People weren't seeing my face, they weren't getting to know me. But I was sort of building this habit of consistency. I was sharing stuff in stories, most days throughout the week, just other things from therapists or content creators that I liked about mental health and that resonated with me. The second month of me having my Instagram page was November 2020. I'm sure you all remember that time. I was very engaged politically, and most of the content that I was resharing was lots of political stuff, right? And again, I don't think that this was particularly helpful in terms of people were not getting to like see me, getting to see my face, hearing my commentary on things. But it was really starting to build a little bit more like connection with people. I was getting a lot more story replies. I was getting a lot more likes because I was sharing something that was my opinion, right? Because I was really showing people who I was, right? And other therapists, which is mostly who followed me at that time, being, a month or two into Instagram, really resonated with that and sort of like started to build relationships with me. It was also in this month that I started doing some polls with my audience. So I would, share a little picture of my coffee or something and say, what's your favorite thing you've done for self care this month? And I would sort of reshare some of the answers. Or if I was resharing a graphic that another therapist posted on Instagram, I would add a poll sticker underneath it. Is this something you've struggled with? Yes or no, right? I shared a post on the Sunday Scaries and I asked, do you get the Sunday Scaries? I asked, what are you doing for yourself today? One that actually got surprisingly a lot of engagement was I shared a statistic and said CBT is effective in significantly reducing anxiety in 70 to 80% of people compared to 30% of people who receive traditional talk therapy. What questions do you have about CBT? Right. And then on that next page, I sort of talked about like, I answered people's questions, right? And people posted them. And with those questions, I really framed it sort of as here's what I do as a CBT therapist. I shared a graphic that somebody else had created, what anxiety feels like. And I asked a little question box, what does anxiety feel like for you in your body when you're anxious? And sort of reshare some of those answers. So that was sort of my first soiree into really like interacting with my community and using Instagram stories as a conversation. Now, I did not verbally speak in my Instagram stories. Like nobody heard my voice in my stories until my third month on Instagram on December 1st, actually. So I must have made some sort of goal or promise to myself. I cannot remember what. But I spoke in Instagram stories for the first time. And I shared, about my morning routine when I was on a walk. I did like a little mini lesson on shutting on yourself. I talked about mind reading, hating the snow. And it was really December was the first month that I started to verbally speak in stories. And also the first month that I even was taking like a selfie and posting it in stories with some text on top. And surprise, surprise, January, I started talking about actually accepting clients and sharing my intro call scheduler and making that connection for people. And that month, January, is when I started to get clients from Instagram. Now, I share all of this to sort of show you this journey that it is okay if you're not like actively selling in Instagram stories in the beginning. It can be really uncomfortable at first. It can be hard to know what to say. It can sort of take a little bit of practice of putting yourself out there to really get to the point of feeling comfortable saying, hey, I'm taking therapy clients. Here's how you can work with me. But I had shared on Instagram for 3 months prior and gotten zero clients from Instagram. And it was when I started showing my face, talking with my voice, and telling people I was accepting new clients that I actually started to get them, right? So I think that that is a great end goal for you. Have that be sort of like your driving force throughout this episode is what can I learn here? How can I start to build the confidence to do this with the ultimate goal of, maybe this week, maybe it's a few weeks from now, actually talking in my Instagram stories, sharing and selling. Now, before we get into some tips for exactly how to do this in Instagram stories, I want to first talk about why this is so important to do. So, the way that the Instagram algorithm works is the content that you post in your feed, right? Whether this is reels or it's like graphics that you might create in an app like Canva or Adobe Express, those reels and posts are really for reach, right? In particular, reels, they are for reaching new people. You'll notice as you post reels, whether you are new or established on Instagram, you are probably going to get the most reach, the most eyeballs, the most people viewing your content when you are posting reels. I really like to think of them as sort of like the way to draw people in to like kind of pique interest. Then I think of posts as a way to establish authority, right? So your post, the graphics tend to be a bit more educational. They tend to be a bit more helpful. They tend to like be something that only you as a therapist would post, not a mental health influencer or a mom struggling with her own postpartum anxiety, right? That sort of like educational authority content really sets you apart as a business owner, as a therapist, as a helping professional. And I think that posts are really important for converting some of those, thousands and thousands of people that discover you through reels into actual followers. Because when they land on your page, they're able to kind of quickly scroll it and see, oh, yes, she's funny, she's relatable, she gets me. And also, following this page will help me. Right. So, reels and posts are sort of like how you reach people and how you convert people into followers and have them stick around. Stories are your most engaged audience. So, usually, like 99.9% of the people who are viewing your stories are going to be people who actually follow you, not people who are discovering you for the first time. And they're going to be the people who follow you who actually engage with your content the most, right? The people who watch your reels all the way through, the people who save it, the people who DM them to their friends, the people who leave comments on things. Because Instagram is showing you people's stories who they think that you are like the most friendly with, the most connected with. If you open your Instagram app now, right, whether it's your personal or your professional account, and you look at the first stories that are like right up in your feed, they're going to be the people who you feel like you truly know on Instagram. And if you scroll all the way to the end, keep scrolling, keep scrolling, keep scrolling, you will see that those are probably the people that you're like, wait, who is this? I don't remember even following you, right? So Instagram is really showing the most connected people your Instagram stories. And for that reason, it is so, so, so helpful to sell in your Instagram stories because it's not always super effective for, somebody to come across a reel for the first time and decide, yes, I want to work with her. She's exactly who I need to be my therapist. Let me go ahead and schedule an intro call right now. Right? Usually people need a little bit more time than that. They might need to build some more trust with you. They might need to think on the idea of starting therapy a little bit more. They might need to have a really anxious day or a really bad fight with their partner before they decide to reach out and get support. And so, if we're sort of able to nurture those people, if we're able to show up in stories consistently, if we're able to build awareness around the fact that we are actually a practicing therapist, that we see clients, that we, excuse me, that we work in their state, right? That is how you are able to convert people into clients. And so if we know that the people who are watching your stories are the most connected to you, they're the most interested in working with you, we have to tell those people regularly what next step to take. We have to tell them regularly how you can help them and sort of make that offer to connect and to help. Okay, now let's talk about how we actually do this. So, first off, is the sort of engagement stickers that Instagram gives you, right? You'll notice that there's options for you to share question boxes, for you to do polls, for you to do emoji reaction buttons. These are all super, super important because they are very easy ways for people to interact with you, right? It can feel challenging to just sort of like reply to a stranger's Instagram story, even if they are kind of opening up that story for connection, right? Even if they're asking a question or like, hey, give me advice, it can feel kind of weird to like slide into their DMs, especially again, if you don't feel super connected to them. But answering a question on a poll, super easy, right? Responding to a question box where it gives you like a limited number of words that you can say there, a lot easier, right? Tapping an emoji reaction button if you can relate, really easy, right? And so those are really good ways to start having conversations with your audience. I think they're also really boundaried ways for therapists to have conversations with their audience, right? You probably don't want people to DM you and say, what does anxiety feel like for you? You probably don't want to get a bunch of paragraphs from people because that really blurs the lines. And you're like, am I supposed to give this person advice now? Am I supposed to pitch them therapy? Like, that's not really how we want to do things as therapists. So I think that the sort of like engagement options that people give you, that Instagram gives you really, are super, super, super effective. So you can keep it simple, right? Maybe you start by sharing what you're doing throughout the day. And you ask a little question box like, what's the worst item on your to-do list today? Maybe you share your coffee order and you post a poll and put like, are you a coffee person or a tea person? Or, does anyone else drink iced lattes year round? Like, give it to me iced or hot coffee only, right? So, really kind of like simple things of just like engaging and interacting and sort of building that connection. And people love to give advice, right? So I'll actually share. I accidentally soft launched my pregnancy to the internet. So I am, at the time of recording this episode, like 12 weeks pregnant. But by the time that you guys are listening to it, I think I'll be like 16 weeks. So I'm sure I'll have announced by then. But I posted on Instagram that I was getting all of this acne on my jaw. And it was just like horrible all over my chin, all over my jaw. And I put a little question box up and was like, does anyone know what this is about? Like, can you give me tips, help? And I got a lot of replies that people were like, yeah, this was like the first sign I was pregnant. And I didn't even know I was pregnant at the time. My Instagram community kind of told me I was pregnant first. And I was like, oh my gosh, what the heck? And lo and behold, about 10 days later, I took a positive pregnancy test. And so, you know, people were like giving a lot of advice. A lot of people were like, you're probably pregnant. But a lot of people were like, it's hormonal. Talk to your physician about this. Get your hormones checked. Have you done anything different with your diet? Are you washing your pillowcases, right? The most engagement that I've gotten on an Instagram story in months and months and months and months. And it had nothing to do with therapy. It had nothing to do with anxiety, right? But it was me showing up as a human and saying, like, holy cow, look at all this acne. What's going on? And me asking for advice. And people were able to connect and to relate. Right. And so this can be so, so, so simple. This does not always have to be therapy related, although it can be. I know a lot of the examples that I gave in the beginning of this episode were because I was still sort of building confidence with how do I show up sort of like as myself aside from being a therapist online. And that's okay. Take your time with that. But I think giving people the opportunity to respond, to share their opinion, to share advice, to say, yes, I resonate, or yes, I'm struggling with this, is just so, so, so helpful with building that connection. Okay. The other point I want to make with this is to really value your community, right? So we know people love to answer questions and feel like their opinion matters to you. So go to them with questions. Then also like use those questions to inform future content. Help people to see that you actually read responses, that you care about them, that you value them, right? So maybe if you post a question box, you go ahead and like share some of those responses. Maybe if you do like an ask me anything, you are sharing those questions and you're answering them in stories. If people are commenting on your reel or post, reply back to them, right? Maybe you reply back and Instagram has a feature where you can reply to an Instagram reel comment with like another reel. So you could do that. Oftentimes when I do that, I'll actually like save it and post it as a story instead of a reel itself. Um, the other day I posted that like I wanted to master the slick back bun, but I was kind of getting like a lot of flyaways still. I asked for like product recommendations. A lot of people recommended like the same type of boarhead bristle brush. And so I shared like a link to that in my stories and was like, the girlies have spoken. This is apparently what you need. And people were like very appreciative of that. Like, oh my God, you used my recommendation. Like, people love that, right? And so make sure that when you are asking people for engagement, that you're also showing them like why it matters to you. You're using that to inform future content, whether that be in stories or reels or posts. Maybe you ask folks for like content ideas, right? Actually act on them, give people the help and support that they're looking for. And that goes so far with building like a really loyal community. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is story sequences. So you've probably heard me say this before if you've been to any of my free trainings, but I think that there is a magic formula for getting people to click the link in your Instagram stories. And what I have seen is it is poll plus link is how you get link clicks, right? And link clicks can be used for anything, right? So I think for most people listening to this podcast, the link click that you want people to click is your intro call scheduler, right? You want people to reach out, you want people to schedule an appointment. But you can also do this to get readers to your blog, right? You can share, a link to that blog post. If you are somebody who's pursuing brand deals, it is really important that you have demonstrated ability to get a lot of link clicks in your stories, right? And so sharing products, as I was talking about, like that sort of slick back bun earlier, right? I didn't just put get a boarhead bristle brush. I linked a boarhead bristle brush. Oh my gosh, say that 3 times fast. I linked a boarhead bristle brush and got a bunch of link clicks in my stories, right? And so brands oftentimes will ask you when they're sort of negotiating rates and all that, can you send me your link clicks from the last 14 days? They want to see typically how much are people clicking. Maybe you're linking to a funny TikTok that you saw. Maybe you're linking to a free training that you're doing or a free guide you put together. Oftentimes in my stories, I'll link to the Private Practice Academy bundle. I'll link to the Reels membership. I'll link to specific podcast episodes, right? So anything that you want to sort of direct people to from your Instagram page, in order to do that, I highly suggest doing a poll and then sharing the link. It is going to increase your link clicks by so much. So let me explain what this looks like, right? So for the first story, you want to ask a specific question with a poll to encourage engagement, right? So let's say that you wrote a blog post on 5 ways anxiety is impacting your relationship, right? I might do a poll first that says, my anxious girlies, are you in a relationship, like single and looking, or like, in a relationship already or already taken or whatever, right? Another poll option could be, do you worry that your anxiety impacts your relationship and like negatively impacts your partner, right? And I might put like, OMG, yes, like, no, my anxiety is only my problem, right? Something that sort of like slows people down and makes them think like, yes, this is me, or no, it's not. And then on the next story, I would probably do a story talking to the camera where I'm offering some insight. I'm sharing my sort of like opinion. I'm kind of giving more context to that poll. And I would put the link there too, right? So I might say, as a therapist, this is something that I see a lot with my clients, right? They worry about, their anxiety causes them anxiety. They worry about, burdening their partner. They're kind of always asking for reassurance. It can cause like fights, right? And the reality is that yes, anxiety is yours to deal with and to struggle with, but you're not doing this alone. Your partner loves you. Of course, it impacts your relationship. I wrote a blog post all about how anxiety impacts your relationship, things you can do so it doesn't damage your relationship. I'm going to go ahead and link that here for you. And I would include that link and captions from my story so it's easy for people to listen to on that next slide. And you are already going to get so many more link clicks on your blog post than if you just went straight into sharing, hey, I wrote a blog post on X, Y, and Z. Now, I am somebody who loves sales. I'm somebody who loves sort of like maximizing the effort there. So I would actually probably post like a third story for that story sequence with the call to action again, right? So this might be like a graphic of the blog post. It might be a screenshot of the blog post. And I would have that and put like, linking blog post here with the link again. And this is so, so, so helpful because that first poll helps people to slow down and recognize I need the next thing that you're going to offer me. The second one, you're already going to get a lot of link clicks. And then the third is like for anyone who was just kind of like tapping by, they didn't take that call to action initially, they're getting a second chance at it. And that is huge. You are going to get so, so, so many more link clicks when you go ahead and do things that way. You can do the same thing with your intro call scheduler, right? So maybe you do a first sticker or first story that is a poll. And maybe you ask if you're licensed in Texas, where do you live? Texas, somewhere else in the US, outside the US, right? And then maybe the next story you're talking about how you live in Austin and you see clients virtually all across Texas. You have 2 openings for new clients on your caseload. Here's who you enjoy working with, that kind of thing. Or maybe you do a poll of, do you have a hard time setting boundaries with your mother-in-law? Like, OMG, yes, like, no, my mother-in-law's a saint, right? Maybe in the next story side, you're talking about how this is really hard for a lot of moms. It's really hard for a lot of moms who've always kind of struggled with like people pleasing and anxiety, but now have this desire to like protect their kids. And it's something that you really specialize in helping. As a therapist who specializes in working with moms, who specializes in family dynamics, and that things kind of do not always have to be this way, right? And you share your intro call scheduler and put like accepting new clients. Maybe the third story side, you're like, maybe you write a little graphic or you take a picture of yourself and you add some text on top of like who I work with, right? New moms in California, struggling with anxiety, complicated relationships with family, like start here with a free 15-minute intro call, right? We're sort of giving people those options and we're helping them to see how the link that you're sharing will help them, whether that is the blog post that you're sharing, whether that is how starting therapy will help them, whether that is how taking that first step of doing a 15-minute intro call will help them. But we're sort of like giving more of a warm up to it instead of jumping straight into the sale. Something else that I think is really helpful if you're struggling to post in stories is coming up with a few things that you share in stories regularly. So maybe every Friday you share the highlight of your week, you share a low point of your week, and you kind of ask your followers to do the same, right? Maybe like a rosebud thorn exercise. Maybe you share, lessons from client sessions in your minivan in the car pickup line, right? And you do sort of like mini moments in the minivan. And that is like a signature series of yours that you do whenever you happen to get to school pickup earlier and you have a few minutes. Maybe every Thursday you share a new dinner recipe or what you're doing for date night with your partner. Maybe on Mondays you share mental health tips, based on the theme of the week. Some ones that I've done over the years, and with like you don't have to commit to a series and doing it forever, right? Like you can do it and then ditch it at some point, right? So I used to share my to-do list daily. That was really helpful for me in terms of like building the habit of sharing on Instagram. I used to do weekly Q&As on my Instagram page where I would do like an ask me anything and I would answer audience questions. I would share workout selfies whenever I went to, the gym or Pilates class. I would share when I got my nails done, right? Every time I used to love doing like the nail designs. And so I would always share, I would always like have people vote on nail design options before I went to the salon to get them. And I think that these are just sort of like little ways to engage and sort of build that habit, right? If you know that you're doing a weekly series, or if you know that every time you get your nails done, you want to share an Instagram story about it, it sort of gives you content to post without having to think about it all the time. Laura Caruso is somebody who is great with this. So her and I worked together when she was first starting her Instagram and her private practice. If she's amazing. If you don't already follow her, you can go ahead and do that. I'll include her handle in the show notes, but it's lauracaruso.therapy. And when she was first starting her Instagram page, she did like a series, Coffee Cues, which is basically an ask me anything, right? But where she was drinking her coffee and answering those questions, and she did it every week. And now she has a whole podcast where she answers audience questions every week, right? And these things can grow, they can evolve. But I think that it is so helpful to sort of just create ways that you consistently engage with your audience, that you consistently engage with your community, and that they can expect to hear from you, to get your advice, to get your support, to feel like they get to know you, to hear your voice. It's just so, so, so good for building connection. The last thing that I'll say is to really make sure that you are engaging back, right? Obviously, as therapists, we are not going back and forth in DMs with folks, right? If people are like asking a lot of personalized advice, I definitely recommend having some boundaries there. Inside of the Private Practice Academy bundle, I share some like specific DM templates of things that you can send folks if they're asking for personalized advice. But if people reply to your story and they're like, oh my gosh, that latte looks so good, reply to them, be like, it was the best, thank you. Kind of build that community, right? If people are tagging you in stories, if they're resharing your posts, reshare those occasionally in your stories. Add some context to them. Talk about how cool it is to see people resharing stuff, or why that really resonated with folks, or what you liked most about it, or another thought you have on the subject. When people comment on your reels or your posts, reply back to those comments, right? I think that it's just so hard. Like, we spend so much time working to get engagement with our audience, and then oftentimes when we get it, we just ignore it, and it really like is working against you. You're taking 2 steps forward and you're posting and you're doing the things, but you're not building that community, and so you're really taking 1 step back at the same time. Okay, so the last thing I really want to talk about is not overthinking stories, right? They are the opportunity for you to show up imperfect, for you to show up authentic, and for you to be a little more messy and to be yourself, right? As a therapist, you already have so much authority, right? There's also like this inherent power imbalance that you have with your clients, right? It is so important that we are able to make ourselves more human. So it's okay if it is uncomfortable for you at the beginning, but please, please, please try and push yourself to just show up as you, right? Don't feel like you have to do your hair and makeup, the way that you might for an Instagram reel. Not that you have to do it for either, but in stories, if you are able to show up and do a client session that day with how you look, you should be able to show up in stories that day. You do not need to be any more put together, right? Pretend like you are on FaceTime with a friend. Like, be very just conversational. If it's really hard for you to talk at first, that's okay. Take a picture maybe and add some text on screen, but really try and be human. Something that has helped me a lot too, in terms of like not overthinking so much and being able to be more consistent with stories, is setting aside like literally 10 minutes on Mondays and just mapping out what is one thing I can talk about in stories every day this week. A lot of the time what I share is in the moment, but if I know, okay, I just have one thing I want to share, that is really helpful, right? And so maybe it is a client lesson. Maybe it's that I'm going to Pilates on Tuesday and Thursday I'm going out to dinner with my family. Maybe it is that I'm accepting new clients on Wednesday and Friday I want to share about the podcast episode I did, right? But if I just have one little idea there and that is kind of on my to-do list to share, I think that that can really sort of like build that muscle. Okay, so quick little recap. We covered a lot today, but what I hope that you take from this episode is that stories are super, super important in order to convert your Instagram following into paying clients or paying customers for another one of your offers. So use Instagram stories as a way to connect. Use the engagement stickers that Instagram gives you. Share story sequences when you can. Do a poll before sharing your link, and you are going to drastically increase your link clicks. Ask your community for their input, whether that is in stories or to inform future posts. Maybe start a signature story series and find something that works for you and kind of like triggers your brain that it is time to show up in stories. And create content in a way that feels authentic, that feels human. Do a little bit of planning so you can, what is it saying? Like, to plan to fail, right? Do a little bit of planning so that way you know that you can stay consistent, set yourself up for success, and just do the dang thing, right? I hope that you take some action from today's episode, pick at least one of these strategies and test it out, and DM me at Business of Therapy and send me one of your stories that you did after like having inspiration from this episode. I want to see how you guys are taking this and implementing it, and I will be cheering you on as always. Thank you, my friends.